Gabrielle Clark, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. How are you doing today, Brent?
I'm doing great now. I've really been wanting to get you on for a while. You've been a person that has intrigued me for a long time, and I got a great interest in not only what you talk about, the subject matter, but the way you do it and how forcefully you do it. I think that's a really admirable thing, regardless of what people think about your views. I think you know speaking up and saying what you think is sort of a dying art. People aren't generally putting their foot down and saying like, nope, this is my line, and this is what I'm holding to. So with that preamble, why don't you give my viewers an introduction for those who might not know who you are and what you're about?
Thank you so much. That was very lovely. My name is Gabrielle Clark, and I fight indoctrination in K through 12 education. My son was being discriminated against at school, and he was asked to list his identities, his race, religion, sexual orientation, those kinds of things, and he was asked to apply the signifier of privileged or oppressed to those identities. And this was an exercise in the sociology of change course in his civics class as a senior in high school. So when we refused to complete that assignment and asked to opt out of that class, we were met with just no. And he was threatened with graduation. He was even suspended. Um, so we felt like we had no other recourse but to sue. And in so doing, we filed the first federal lawsuit against woke indoctrination in America. And we were very successful in that lawsuit. We were homeless when we first got involved with that lawsuit, and now I live in a nice bungalow on the beach. So I'm under an NDA, so we really can't talk a whole lot about that situation. But um, needless to say, I did spend quite a lot of time being active against the indoctrination in schools on behalf of CRT and SEL, that's critical race theory and social emotional learning. And while I was fighting for my son, my daughter was being socially transitioned to believing she was a boy through the SEL program. Unbeknownst to me, my daughter was being indoctrinated by her school. And once I realized what was happening, we decided to flee Las Vegas, Nevada, and return home to my hometown of Houston, Texas, so that I could help her understand reality. And I created a program, the Affirming Reality methodology, that is being used all over the world right now. It is the most effective assistance program in the world.
Very cool, very cool. So I have a couple of questions, man, because it seems to me when I talk to people, there's like this understanding that woke has gotten out of control, but I don't think people understand what woke is, and particularly the details. What is critical race theory? What is SEL? Where does it come from? How did it originate? What are the philosophical underpinnings? How did you become aware of it? Was it really through this one, experience with your child in school, or was it you had some awareness of this and maybe some of the philosophy and language to be aware of going into this, and you just got flagged in this one instance? I kind of want to understand that arc as far as your knowledge there.
Nobody's ever asked me that before. But I think there was, I think there was just this understanding that something was not right with our society. And I remember thinking maybe this is the point at which I've just gotten old and I just have turned into a fuddy duddy because I knew that that was coming. Right? And I think that was kind of during the Obama administration, in that time period where so many things culturally were shifting. And I was just saying, I don't know if I agree with this. And then I had to rethink that and second guess myself and say, oh no, you're just getting old. But that's the indoctrination part, right? So all of us have been indoctrinated for decades to believe that the societal decline that we're all experiencing is somehow normal, but it's not. And I think that it needed to get to this fever pitch of the unfortunate and I don't know, maybe even I don't know, fortuitous situation with COVID and the lockdowns and all of those things for us to really become hyper aware of how powerful our government has become and how powerful the bureaucrats and institutions and systems that we had come to rely on had over our lives. And when it affected my family specifically, and we were told that our civil rights were no longer valid, that was when at that point I was just like, nope, I'm an American, god damn it, and you can't do this to me. I mean, that was when the earrings was coming off. I mean, everything it changed. It changed for me then. I said I'm not participating in this experiment anymore.
Man, where was everybody else? Because there's a few groups of people that really did take a stand during the COVID thing. But one of the things that I talk about a lot on this show is how sad I was to watch the country just completely fold like a lawn chair the second that happened. And there's it's particularly the right folks, right? This is one of my criticisms of the traditional Republican right,
Yeah,
is they talk so much shit.
they're
Stat,
cowards.
they oh, we're going to fight the government. We need our Second Amendment so we can fight a tyrannical. Stack up or fuck off. Come to my house, like all this stuff. Like
Yeah.
it is ridiculous. The craziness that these people talk,
Hmm.
and then the time when it was a horrifically tyrannical government, they all just shut up and sat down. And so I
That's right.
really applaud you for doing that. And I'm asking myself, where was everybody else? Because there were so few people, so few examples of people that took a principled stance. They're out there, but man, it is a minority.
I mean, and it was shocking to me as a Texan. As a Texan, I thought surely we were going to there were going to be more people who stood up to this. As a matter of fact, I was completely blown away when we needed to find lawyers to fight this civil lawsuit. We went we went to Republican conservative lawyers, right leaning lawyers and law firms, and we were told no. And we were told to just go to another school or just do the assignment and don't worry about it. Just comply, basically. And I was really shocked by that. It wasn't it really was, even the institutions that were in place to as public interest firms and things like that, the ACLU or the Southern Poverty Law Center, they were like, nah. I mean, it just so I was just like, what is even happening? And some of the law firms that had traditionally been had come had started forming to fight First Amendment and free speech cases, they wouldn't help us because my son was in high school, he wasn't in college. But they didn't realize that some of these things had filtered down into high schools and it wasn't just happening in colleges anymore. And so I mean, I didn't I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what to do. All I knew was that I wasn't going to allow this to happen to my son. I was married to a lawyer. My late husband was a lawyer, and I I just knew that he would not be okay with me allowing that to happen to our son.
Well, kudos again. Like I said, I don't know what to tell people, but saying what you think is so important. I think there's uh, so much bad that happens in the world because one person or two people or five people didn't just stand up and say no. Because I think there's a lot of people that are hanging back in the cut. And I saw this during COVID that would privately tell me, oh, I'm actually against this. No, I don't support this. This is bullshit. but when it came time to actually stand up and do something, they didn't want to do it. But I did see sometimes when people would take that step, people would follow. Right. And so I think there's just, if more people just actually said what they thought, I think the world would be a much better place, because I think there's so much evil happens in the world just because people won't stand up and just speak truthfully. They all just assume that somebody else is thinking that, well, they must believe it too. They're not speaking up, and everyone just quietly runs right into the grave. That's how the Soviet Union happened, right? Like you have to have somebody at some point standing up and being like, no, and I mean it.
Well, and I think there's something more nefarious that's going on besides just people standing up, because I think that we have, I don't know, gone into a new iteration of a tyrannical existence where there are some people who are saying a lot of things, but they're not saying the things that are going to improve society. They're actively doing and saying things that are going to tear society down. And they're doing it under the guise of leadership and under the guise of free speech and all of that stuff, and they're further indoctrinating the masses into believing that somehow this revolutionary way of thinking, it should be the future, instead of the principles of the principles of democracy and freedom and all of those things, right? All of those Socratic and Greek stuffs that they all talk about, these philosophical things. They're not applying that. They're not applying it to the society that we live in now.
Can you give me an example? Sorry to interrupt, but can you give me an example of somebody who you believe is like a truly bad actor that is maybe? It sounds like you're claiming that they're preying on people's empathy or trying to manipulate the discourse in a way that's dishonest for nefarious purposes. So I'd love to hear an example of that. What do you mean?
Well, I think that there's plenty of people to choose from. There's lots of people that I think are making a mess of things on both sides of the political discourse,
Oh,
right?
so you mean in politics? You're talking about people in government? Oh,
It doesn't necessarily mean people in government are talking heads, the ominous they. And even people that or people that you are around a lot. There's a like the people who will blackpill you, or the people who will talk about existentialism or even fundamentalism, because that's the only way forward. I think that those kinds of ideas are becoming more and more popular on either side, on in any political spectrum, and in all sociological group breakdowns of their groups, because there's a vacuum of leadership. There's nobody who has the right intentions who will step up and stand up and speak out. There's not enough of us who will say and be the sane voice and say, hey, no. I'll give you an example of somebody who I would say is actually doing that and creating a good leader, to follow, that is not a political person, that's Robbie Starbuck. Robbie Starbuck is actually doing work, right? That is causing a result without using the government at all, without using political influence really at all. He's just using his bully pulpit as a social media influencer to do so, and it's making our society better. I think there are a lot of people who have been able to do that. I do it through lawfare. I like to use the legal system because it's tried and true. And for the most part, if your rights are being violated, the system that we have in place, and that the woke have been using for decades, to move the needle as far as setting precedent and things like that in the courts, has been through lawfare. And I use lawfare because I feel like, this is America. It's the American way. When your civil rights are being violated, use the court system. That's what it's for. The civil courts are there when your rights are being violated, and the criminal courts are there if someone commits a crime against you. So that's that's how we handle it. And I think that more people should do that, but we don't because too many people say, "Oh, I don't want to get involved in a lawsuit." They're afraid of how much it's going to cost, or they just don't even know the law. They don't even know that their rights are being violated. They don't even know that they have legal recourse, and that's unfortunate. More people need to know about the law.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that there's so many people nowadays who are so concerned, particularly after the aftermath of the pandemic and the inflation crisis. And like people are trying to just put food on the table. People are
Sure,
trying to keep the lights on. People are trying to get their kids into college.
sure.
And they're trying to keep their head down and just see if they can make it through. And I don't think anybody, not anybody, but there's very few people that are like, yeah, I'm really going to stick my neck out there, put my face in the fan, be like you, and take the backlash from the media. Have all of the nasty stuff that gets drug up in lawsuits put on Main Street. Like that doesn't sound very savory to people. But ultimately, that might be an effective strategy that people should consider. And I also agree with you that civics has really declined in the United States. I think don't people have any clue what their alleged rights are? What the law says in their community. It's a little bit saddening to me. Like folks are kind of, and I don't know if it's like just apathy or people just trying to make ends meet and prioritizing the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. They're trying to take care of the basic needs first. I'm not sure what it is, or it could be just we don't have trust in our institutions anymore. People just don't trust that the court system is going to get them an outcome that is justice.
Well, I think there's varying reasons, right? I mean, I know that a lot of conservatives, I mean, especially in Texas, we have been groomed for years to believe that somehow filing a lawsuit is a disingenuous way to make money. You know what I mean? And it is just a money grab. Unfortunately, that's the system that we have, and it's based on a punitive damage that results in the acquisition or loss of money, depending on whatever side you're on. So that's the method that we have, and really, in this particular instance, from what I have experienced, we're not talking about the same thing as an ambulance chaser who's just gonna, cause problems for some doctor who did the best that they could or whatever. Or some slip and fall douchebag who goes into different mom and pop stores and intentionally slips on something and then files these frivolous lawsuits. We're talking about we're talking about a system that has so much money that it is imperative that we cripple that system by taking away that weapon. And the only way that we can really put a dent in it is to sue them. And unfortunately, that's the system that we have. So but trying to explain that to a lot of conservatives, especially Texans, their whole, I mean, and libertarians too, their whole thing is but it puts an undue burden on the system because that's taxpayer money. But you have to understand this taxpayer money, it either goes to the individual or it's going to go to some DEI asshole. I mean, you can choose. I mean, I mean, for my part, I would rather take that money and make them afraid to do that anymore. I mean, the school that my son was going to does not offer that class anymore. And I'm pretty sure that is in no small part to what we brought.
Yeah, fantastic. I really want to ask you this. This is really the more I watch your stuff, I just want to ask: did you just come out of the womb like going against the grain? Because everything I know about you is like it is so heterodox based on what society says you should be, how you should think. Like for example, you're a conservative and you're black. Like that immediately. I mean, not only is that it's becoming less rare, but it is historically somewhat rare. What Joe Biden said: if you
Yeah,
don't
I'm
vote
not
for
black
him,
according to him.
yeah, apparently that's Yeah, I mean,
I wouldn't blink, Brent.
isn't that wild? Oh my gosh. I had Maj Toure on like a month ago and we talked about that and I'm just like,
I
yeah,
like
you
him.
tell you tell him he's not black and look out. That is that's so insulting. It is so absolutely insulting. But I digress. But then you're also an atheist too. That
Yeah.
is somewhat rare, right? And there's all these things about you that are sort of like I said, it's kind of against the
Contradictory.
grain. Yeah, and it's not. I don't think it's contradictory necessarily. But you get what I'm saying though. It's I'm starting to like check all these boxes. I'm like, oh, she's an independent thinker. She's doing her own thing, and I'm just wondering if you were just you came out that way, or if there's something in your life that sort of you know pushed you in that direction. I'm just curious how you got to that state.
Well, I think being half black and half white in Texas probably, really does make you see a lot of different perspectives, right? I mean, Texas. Well, first of all, I'm from Houston, Texas. Houston is the most diverse city in the entire country. A lot of people think it's New York, but it isn't. There are more languages spoken in Houston, Texas, than there are in any other city in the country. So, you see a lot when you're in an environment like that. And my parents having separated, one living on one side of Houston and one living on the other side of Houston, that made it, I don't know, it made my childhood interesting, having to grow up in so many different kinds of environments. I mean, on my 21st birthday, I went to the opera. I don't know what other people did, but that's what I did. But I also do stuff like, we go on trail rides and all kinds of other things like that. You just get a very diverse understanding of real life and of a life for different kinds of people. So it does shape your perspective, I would say. Having no identity, but also um, the hood Billy identity that is Texas, right? That does happen when you spend your entire life in the hood listening to country and western music along with rap music, stuff like that. It makes you a more I don't know, well-rounded individual, in that you have a lot of different perspectives that you're hearing from all the time, and you see a lot of different kinds of diverse interactions between people, and different socioeconomic levels and all of those things. That and that I think that was, I mean, I think that was the reason why the universe tapped me to do this, right? Because I'm this woman who, poor woman, homeless woman, widowed mother with 5 kids, um, you know, who has a white child, because my son is white, and was discriminated against, because he's white. I mean, how often, and how what is the likelihood? What are the odds of that happening? I mean, and it was a landmark case, and it will go down in the history books as um, a bizarre phenomenon in our society, that we
Yeah,
we divided each other based on some, their you know identities in that way.
yeah, woke is really weird. The sort of hyper focus on identities, intersection of various types of identities. Some people refer to it as oppression Olympics because it's a good shorthand, where it's like you have to take all your different mixed identities of, well, I'm
Sure.
disabled, I'm gay, I'm white, and you have to sort of articulate levels of privilege hypothetically. I don't know how you'd even objectively quantify this, and then stick it all together and figure out where you get stack ranked on the privilege board. And that is
They
such
did,
a
though. They did. They had the oppression privilege matrix of how, which identities held what signifier. So, if you're white, then you're privileged. I mean, and you think about that. Like, my son, he's white, and so he's privileged, but his dad died when he was 1 year old. He didn't have a single memory, not one. And at the time, we were homeless. He was sleeping on a mat on the floor, not a mattress, a mat on a dirty floor in a motel in Las Vegas. What the hell kind of privilege is that?
Yeah, that's
How is that? How does that, I mean, just because you're white, you're somehow privileged to be, in this position?
Yeah, that's
No.
another thing that I find super insulting is this sort of concept that the individual doesn't matter. We don't care anything about you other than some immutable characteristics which
Mhm.
map onto perceived power structures. So if you know anything about postmodernism, postmodernism really is the underpinning of all critical theory, including CRT. And basically postmodernism makes the claim that you can't know anything about objective reality. True, you talk truth to a postmodernist, they're like, "Fuck off." We don't talk that language. All they look at society as groups of people that are in power dynamics with each other. They're in conflict, and one group, based on some certain identity, is alleged to have more power or less power, and that's why they so hyper focus on identity and sort of stack ranking people by their relative power. It's really gross.
And I think that that has given rise to queer theory, where people they don't want to be the man. They don't want to be Karen. They don't want to be, they don't want to be the oppressor. So what do if you can't change these immutable characteristics? How do you make yourself not be an oppressor? Oh, well, I'm queer, so there's that. I mean, I've seen so many teenage girls who didn't want to grow up to be their Karen mothers, or they didn't want to be, their fathers left them and they didn't want to be like the woman who their father left, or whatever, or young men who are constantly shit on, so they don't want to be a man anymore. I mean, this has been so unbelievable. Postmodernism has been so unbelievably detrimental to society. I can't even see how the majority of people in the country aren't losing their minds over this, and
They
how.
did, though. Hold on. I think they did. I think this election is a pretty strong referendum that people have had enough. Correct me if I'm wrong, but that's how I'm reading the tea leaves. Is like
The way I'm reading the tea leaves about that is that they're worried about their money. I live in Texas, where we are just now getting rid of our DEI programs. Texas had the most gender clinics in the country at one time. I mean, we still don't have the right laws even to even fight this stuff on a level past mutilating children. I mean, and when you try to talk to some of the elected officials about it, they just know so little about it. They can't even really understand what it is that you're trying to say. So, I mean, and even when you try to discuss it with people, it's unbelievable how little they know about this. It doesn't reach them, so they don't have to deal with it. A lot of people don't realize in Texas that there's still all kinds of DEI and queer theory programs and things like that in schools, and even in colleges, even in high schools. I just had a mother come to me, and the principal is allowing a social transition of their daughter in a high school in the middle of Houston, Texas. That should be unheard of at this point, but it's not, because people are still doing it. The thing about the Marxists and stuff like that, they don't care about the rules. They're not going to play by the rules. So even though we do have laws about all kinds of stuff, they don't care about that.
Yeah, and I think to your point, one of the reasons people may not be so connected to this issue is the fact that it affects such a tiny sliver. It's a minority, and if it's your kid, it is the biggest deal in the world. But when you talk about overall metrics, like it's just not a bunch of people. The social transitioning more, it feels like there's like this social contagion that's going on. Particularly, I think the literature alludes to females, yeah, adolescent females being more prone to these types of social contagions.
Yes.
That remember the TikTok thing where people were getting ticks, and like there's all these things that seem to affect. No, it is. It's almost like a little fad, like a wildfire that burns
Yeah, the
through.
Tourette's craziness. Yes.
And then the cutting. There was a similar thing with cutting that happened. These things happen, and I think this is a very similar type of thing. So you have some of this. People get swept up in it, but I think the majority of the people aren't really hardcore about it. They just kind of, it's a phase, and they sort of go with it, and it sort of rises and falls and burns out. But I think that there are some people that are legitimately harmed by this. You know, you're sterilizing children, you're cutting off breasts, you're doing things that are irreversible
Sure.
to these kids. And like I said, it's a relatively small number. So some people might not be super worried about that issue. It's always just a small number of people. But as you can attest to, if it's your child, that's the whole world. Like there's no bigger issue.
Well, let's think of let's. I'm glad you said that. Really, I mean, because I think that is I think that is a misconception that I don't think that a lot of people really truly understand. So according to, I want to say this is the, I would have to go back and look at the statistic because I haven't really looked at it in a long time, but I think this is according to the CDC. There are 30 to 50% of urban age, school age children who are identifying as LGBTQIA plus plus.
Yeah, it's a big net, though. That is a pretty big net.
Yeah, but that is identifying as basically the queer people, right? The queer flag in the queer community. Okay. Let's say 10.
Actually, honestly, I don't even know what that means, right? So I do know the. So I just got to say this. I'm an old person like you. Maybe I'm a boomer, but like I get it's like you have LGBTQ. Q is in the queer. Like Q is
Right.
the queer of the alphabet
Okay, the
people.
rainbow umbrella.
Sure, but I think you mean like the flag with like that changes every week and
The
has
Franken flag. Yeah.
yeah. So I get it, but that's, I mean, there's a lot of people just like regular. I'm gay, or I'm like they get lumped
Sure.
in with that whole thing, and it becomes very difficult to like I said, it's a very wide net that people get caught up in. And I also think there's some social pressure because I've got
That
some
definitely is social pressure. There's no
so
doubt about that. The social contagion aspect of this is I mean, I would say that is that's the thing that concerns me the absolute most. The indoctrination, that the social contagion. Those are the things that, and I only bring that up about the rainbow community, right? The LGBTQIA plus plus is because it comes with a set of ideals that a lot of people do not shake as they grow up. This is something that they will take with them lifelong, and we've seen this in on the coasts with Washington and Oregon and California. You know, now it is working on a third generation of children who are growing up with no aim and no goal and no purpose. So it's not just, a phase they'll just grow out of it. This is becoming more and more of a
don't mess up those pronouns or you're going straight to hell.
all right, kitty. Anyway, but I teach parents about how to recognize it so that they can navigate their schools, but also so that they can pull their children out of this with reality and logic and rationality, so that they can identify some of the parallel language messaging that they themselves are indoctrinated with and pointed out to their children as well. Um, it takes a long time and it is very difficult to understand. I actually spent quite a lot of time going back and looking at television series from the 90s and the aughts, to see some of where the indoctrination began for us all. Back in the day, there were TV shows like House and ER, police procedurals too, that always had one episode of a trans identifying person or someone who is experiencing what we now understand as a disorder of sexual development. So we've been pushed into this for a very long time, and so teaching parents about that and making them understand that this is this culture war that we're all experiencing has its roots in linguistics, and it has its roots in postmodernism and Marxism and all of that stuff, so that they can better navigate how to get themselves and their children out of it.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. And I was going to ask you this because, like, you reference reality a lot, right? And
Oh,
I don't necessarily think there's a disconnect or a problem necessarily with the gender ideology, folks, and reality. I think it's a word game, right? I think that's a linguistic problem because everybody likes to talk about how many genders there are, and the people on one side like there's only two genders, and then there's like no, there's infinity number of genders, right? But
yeah.
when you actually get down to the brass tacks of it, like gender isn't like a thing. It's not. It's not. I
Yeah.
mean, if anything, gender can be best described as like personality traits, right? That's ultimately what we're talking about is human personality, and that's why the gender cult is like, well, actually, no, I'm this thing over here. And then they describe it with essentially what are personality traits. They define it and then they say, well, I'm fluid. I can choose any one of these I want. There's a disconnect between that and biology. I think that's where a lot of conservatives and the lefties get sideways of each other. They're differences of terms. It's a linguistic problem. Is like conservatives, what they really mean, what they should be saying is like, look, biological sex is real. Humans are dimorphic sexually. We have a
Sure.
male and we have a female, and then you can talk about, well, DSD. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I know. We know the exceptions, right? There are edge
Right.
cases. We get it, right? We've seen the Olympics. We saw the boxing match. We know how this thing goes.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to know your thoughts on that because like it's like I said, it doesn't feel like it's a reality problem. It feels like it's a linguistic and a communication problem ultimately at its foundation.
Well, I mean, that's the academic understanding of it, right? You read all of these things, you read all of this stuff about it, and that is the conclusion that you draw from it, right? But when you have a child that is screaming their heads off and losing their minds, and harming themselves, and pitching a fit and just all of that stuff because someone misgendered them. I mean, the academic understanding really kind of goes out the window.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
so I mean,
That's a different problem I think you're pointing at right there. I think that is the problem of kids in this. There's a broader culture. I think it's been driven a lot by social media, which is trying to find meaning and trying to find importance, like
sure,
value in themselves as an individual. And instead of doing something of import, helping somebody, improving yourself, reaching a goal, right? It's so much easier now to get social credibility by claiming victimhood, by oh, you oppressed me, and then doing a TikTok video about it and going viral. Like there's no effort in that. There's nothing positive that's coming out of that. And I think that is a really caustic trend that I'm seeing that's driving kind of a lot. I think it's reinforcing on that side a lot of these gender uh, ideologies and the postmodernism and queer theory. All of those things sort of feed into that sort of like it's just a loser mentality, frankly. I'm not calling all these people losers. Don't get me wrong, internet.
I know what you're saying. Yeah, I mean, I know what you're saying, and I think that's why I kind of, and other people academically have described it as personalities as well. But when you see it in person, you see that it is not that. You know what I mean? That the idea that these are somehow personalities. Even when you talk to an old school transsexual, who by the way, a lot of old school transsexuals are also starting to detransition as well, because they have kind of come to the understanding that they were also lied to about their condition, and their underlying issues were never addressed. They were just turned into this thing, because it was the up and coming and the new trend in psychology. So, I mean, yes, when you look at things like TikTok, or you look at videos and YouTube and all of that stuff, you could deduce that that it has some things really more to do with personalities, like pansexual, sapiosexual, whatever. Yeah, of course, those are all, we just called them the lifestyle back in the day, right?
That's where the
um
weirdos hung out.
yes. we just call them kinky. But so it does seem like it's giving a label to your kink, right? And so I understand, how it can look like that. But when you're on the front lines looking at all of this stuff in a child, and how it, even not even necessarily in a child, but in an adult, a vulnerable adult, how it shakes out, it really is a lot more nefarious than that. Um, and I think that too, that there's, something to be said for this, handshake deal between the Marxists or globalists or whatever the shit you want to call it, the ominous they who are trying to ruin society, and the people who are trying to really normalize things like pedophilia or neonatalism and things like that, because that the idea that it's somehow a personality also makes it easier for a pedophile to say, well, it's just my personality.
And they do now. This whole minor attracted
That's
person thing
right.
is out of
That's
control.
right. And I mean, that's one of the reasons why I have to, and I've heard this argument before, but like I said, when you see some of the craziness that goes on behind the scenes, and when you see, I go to protests all the time, and they're violent, and they're intense, and they're trying to hurt us. They're not doing that because of some personality distinction that they want to be known as. This is a serious, this has become a serious, mental health issue, for our nation, and for our time.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I guess the point I was trying to make is that I think there's an element of this that is somewhat, I don't want to say harmless, but it's not as dire, right? And I think what happens with people, particularly, this is the kind of the social contagion thing I'm talking about. The most reasonable people that get pulled along with this, it ends up kind of like Pokemon. It was like, oh, I came up with a new gender, and let me tell you about it. These are the characteristics, and then do this TikTok, and it gets like 10 million views. I think it is like there's this creative aspect, which is probably a good thing. Like person that makes this stuff up, like great, like cool. You probably have a career in the creative arts somewhere, great. But I think that's kind of what it is. It's like a game that's being played. They're trying stuff on. They're playing with things. They want some social clout for inventing a new gender, or I'm 17 genders and I'm switching between them, and now you must know my pronouns, and announcing to everybody this is what I am this week. I mean that game exists, like that is definitely going on. But the thing that's tough about this issue for me is there is some of this laughable stuff that is kind of, I don't want
It's
to say
fun.
lighthearted, but it's kind of funny. You can make fun of it a little bit, but
It's
underneath it, at the very bottom, the people that are actually directly impacted from it, it is not fucking funny at all. Chloe Cole. You look at some of these detransition stories and some of the just horrific, mutilations that have happened to people,
Yes.
and that's not funny at all. So this is a tough topic for everyone to sort of parse out as a society. It's like, what are we to do with this circus?
And what I would say to that is, I mean, I know all of these detransitioners, and I've found lawyers for some of them, and I'll say, you don't know really the extent of how gut wrenching this is until you hug an 18-year-old with no breasts.
Mm.
Until I mean, I'm a woman, right? A very well endowed woman, and when I go to hug another woman, I expect to feel something there. And when you hug a detransitioner, a 17-year-old detransitioner that has not suffered any kind of cancer or anything like that, that has nothing where something should be, even if it's small, it should be something there. It is a very visceral feeling.
Mm.
It is you are aware, and it is life changing.
Yeah, I
So,
can't imagine. I honestly can't imagine because I've got a kid that just turned 18. So like that age is really like stuck in my mind right now. It's just burned in at the moment. And I
Sure.
remember I went to go take her a few months ago. She wanted to get her nose pierced. I'm like, great. Guess what? You have to have a parent there and have a consent. And if she
Yeah.
wanted a tattoo, literally nobody would give it to her. It is
No.
illegal to, because you're permanently altering your body. It's illegal. But then all this other stuff is like you can permanently sterilize somebody. I mean, your prefrontal cortex doesn't even develop fully until you're between 22 and 25 years old. Your ability to make long-term life impacting decisions, particularly ones that will remove your ability to ever have children, give that to a child is absolutely insane. I can't
Yeah.
even believe this happens.
It's madness. I mean, my daughter will be 17 next year. I mean, next week. Next week. She'll be 17 next week. And going through this with her, it was just, I mean, when she when she told me, "Well, I'm not going to get top surgery just yet." I was like, "I am never going to let you do that, honey." I mean,
Kidnapper, do what you need to do.
do you know how many parents, and let me just tell you, Brent, I hate to beat a dead horse, but this is another reason why I just feel so strongly about calling it a personality, because there are so many parents who say they'll grow out of it. That is what has happened to too many parents. They thought it's not that big a deal. They also thought, well, we'll just tell them no. But what do you do when the government comes knocking on your door and says, you told your child that they can't be their authentic selves and cut their breasts off. So I'm going to take this child away and give them to somebody who will. That's the extent. I mean, that is the seriousness of what we're dealing with. And I help people parent their children into desistance from social transition all over the world. Even doctors come to me for parenting advice. So when somebody comes to me and says, "Hey, I'm in the car. The police were just out at my house. We're leaving the state right now. What
Mm,
do you do?" And
that is ridiculous. Like I've heard some of those stories, and I've actually got goosebumps right now. Thinking, getting the chills thinking about the state coming to
it's
take
happened
your
to me more than
children.
once. That was a phone call that I've gotten more than once.
Wow, I can't even imagine.
So, it's not as innocuous as what people think. And when we talk about social transition too, we're talking about breast binders and packers, little tiny penises that they make for 4-year-olds, so that insane people can can have Munchausen's, Transhausen's by proxy and trans out their kids at a young age. Can you imagine what kind of psychological issues that a little 4-year-old girl is going to go through when her daddy puts a fake penis inside her panties?
Nah, nah. And you called out something that's exactly what I was thinking too, is kind of like a form of Munchausen. You see,
Yeah.
particularly where it's fashionable, the Hollywood, you'll have like, oh, I've got 3 trans kids. It's like, can you do math? No, you don't.
Yeah,
No, you don't.
you don't have any trans kids. There's no such thing as a trans child. But I mean, the idea that it's somehow fashionable, so fashionable. I mean, that was. I mean, we I went. I gave my testimony. I've given my testimony for several different lawsuits throughout the country, as it pertains to the gender bans. And one of those cases was being heard at the Supreme Court. The Biden administration sued the Attorney General of Tennessee in the U.S. versus Scarametti case, was heard on December 4th. And Annette Bening, the famous actress Annette Bening, was there. I was there too. And she talked about how much more interesting she is. This is an award-winning actress. And her flex was that she's so much more interesting because she has a trans identifying child.
Ghastly.
What kind of psycho do you need to be? What kind of attention whore do you need to be a world-renowned actress, that you need to have more attention and be more interesting by having a trans identifying child?
Yeah, I can't even imagine that. I think I need to turn the page from this one. I'm getting a little gaggy talking about it.
Right, right, right. Well,
So
there is good news though, Brent. Listen to me. There's good news. Here's the good news.
hit me with it.
Myself and my teams are working to help these people fight. And we have also begun creating curriculum so that we can give states options for continued education units for therapists, counselors, and social workers. We want to get this out of our systems and our institutions. So, as of right now, we are working on that based on the affirming reality methodology that I created to help pull my daughter and so many other children out of this trans cult. And so, what we're doing right now is we're in research and development right now, and hopefully within the next 18 months, our product will be ready and we'll be able to provide it to hopefully the state of Texas will be the first. But if it's not, hopefully some of the other states that are fighting back against social transition will implement this as the go-to method for desistance, and we'll be done with gender affirming care. I want this to be something that everyone learns that has to deal with children, either medically or through mental health, through mental health, the mental health community problem in our society. So when you say 30 to 50% of our children are in this gender cult, that is a big number. And let's, for just, for the purposes of, argument, for the sake of argument, let's just say 10% of those identify as LGBT. Okay. And let's say only 5% of those identify as trans. How many people is it going to take to essentially sterilize themselves and render themselves incapable of reproducing? Is that going to take for society to have a full collapse?
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that question, honestly. This is a really complicated issue, and I try to approach these things with two things, like a healthy dose of empathy, right? Because I do care about people, and I think most reasonable people, are like, yeah, I'm not just hating on people because I'm an asshole.
Sure.
But I also understand that empathy can be weaponized. This is one of the main weapons that is sort of embedded in these programs. You can sort of
Yes.
play on people's good intentions,
Sure.
particularly around, like, you've seen the claims like, oh, do you want a
Uh,
trans son or a dead daughter? Like, and the data doesn't bear that out, right? Like it's not it's it's so nefarious how they do this sort of thing. So it's a very difficult line for me because I am generally a very empathetic person. I want the best for people, but at the same time, like, you have to be on guard. So I mean, I love talking to people like you who maybe have seen maybe more of this, like where the rubber meets the road, because I'm up here meta level 50,000 foot view just watching from the sidelines, and I'm looking around like, what the fuck is going on? I'm confused like everybody else.
Sure. I mean, and that's like, so I teach parents what I call parallel language messaging. And that is the false dichotomy, the suicide dichotomy, right? That is the circular thinking and word salads and all, the gaslighting, all of those things, so that they can identify how this is happening in their homes. And some of them don't even realize that they're even doing it. They're even indoctrinated to the degree and to the point that they don't even know how far down they are into this themselves. Um, you know, we talk about the social contagion. The social contagion is real, and the parents are experiencing it as well. This is my assistant, Dr. Nikki Furry, Captain Nikki Furry, Pirate Kitty. I'm sorry. She, I'm sorry. They need to learn how to deal with someone who is suffering from this social contagion.
Got it. Well, that's really cool that you took the initiative to do that. I think there's a lot of people that end up in this world paralyzed and thinking that somebody's got to come save them. Somebody else has got to do it. And, I always keep telling people in my audience, like, you can just do stuff. You don't have to ask
Right.
anybody's permission. Like, you can just do stuff, and I love that. Everyone likes to like think their politicians got to come save them. We have to have a law. We have to have a this or that or the other thing. It's like, you know what? The internet is a beautiful place, and we have so many talented people, and we can just distribute this information. We can make the world a better place through that. And so I'm really glad that you undertook that effort, man. Kudos to that. That's amazing.
Thank you.
But I did want to ask in that same vein, because like I said, I feel like I need to take a hot shower after the first part of this, but I want to look forward, because I need some white. I need to take some white pills, because I've seen a lot of stuff, and skeptical about the future in a lot of ways. And there's a lot of optimism swirling around right now. And so maybe in your space in particular, I know you supported Trump. What do you think, or what do you hope is going to come? Like, what positive things are going to come from this next 4 years?
Oh man, there's going to be some fantastic tweets for sure, for sure.
If he'd ever tweet, he's always on Truth Social. And like, so one of his proxies just, hey, Trump posted this on Truth Social. Like, just tweet it, dude.
Just tweet it out. He does tweet periodically sometimes, and when he tweets, it's so hilarious. I love him so much. I love the mean tweets. I'm like, bring on the mean tweets. I
We can
hate
agree
them
on that.
too. You
Man,
know.
I have my differences with Trump, but I will tell you, he is a funny ass human being. Like, nobody, pure comedy.
He is hilarious. I think we're gonna see some good trade deals. I told my daughter I am super excited about going to Greenland. We're gonna go. We're gonna make that trip. There's a cruise that you can take from Newfoundland to Greenland and then to Iceland. And I want to go talk to some puffins. So I cannot wait until Greenland becomes a territory.
Well, I'll tell you something. Better bundle up, because I had a layover in Iceland, or in Reykjavik, and I had to
Yeah,
walk from the airport, the exit or whatever. You had to walk on the tarmac and then up the
yeah,
stairs to the airplane. It was fucking freezing, and I'm in the airplane, and the wind was blowing so bad that the thing was shaking side to side. And I'm like, you know what? Maybe Iceland isn't the place for me. And apparently, Greenland is even harsher climate than Iceland. So
yeah.
bundle up.
I'm excited about it. Listen, ever since that volcano just outside of Reykjavik went off about 20 years ago, something like that, I have been fascinated with Iceland. So I want to go there. I want to talk to some puffins. I want to go see Eyjafjallajökull and see what's going on there at their mountain and everything. I'm excited. I guess the thing that I'm seeing is that, Trump has big dreams, stuff that we as Americans weren't even really, thinking about. Who in the world was thinking about Iceland? And I think that, he's going to make some real big things happen for America that we had forgotten that we should be doing. You know what I mean? Not
Like
just
what? Like, give me an example.
well, for acquisitions, like even just acquiring new territories, we had just kind of closed the door on that. I feel like some of I mean, how Apple just isn't doing anything different. They're not innovating anymore. They're just making variations of the things that they already have. I feel like America has gotten to that place too, which I think is kind of sad. And I'm glad that people like Elon Musk are have gotten involved as well, because I want to see some space action going on. I want to go to Mars too. So, if we have more innovation and things like that, maybe we can solve some of the problems that we have, because through innovation we do find solutions to problems that we weren't really expecting. And we get to see a lot of really cool things. So I'm excited about the prospect of new technologies and new inventions and new territories being acquired by America. I'm excited about Just because I'm a conservative doesn't necessarily mean that I don't believe in innovation or progress. Um, and I believe in reality, and the reality is that humanity moves forward, not backward. So let's move forward with it in a realistic way so that we don't lose ourselves as a society.
Yeah, and that's an interesting take, and I will tell you this, like I'm kind of like a single issue person at this point. Like I'm looking at the debt, I'm looking at government spending. I'm like, yo, this is a real,
Libertarian, true libertarian.
yeah, yeah. Like I'm a economic nerd, and I'm like, this is a big ass problem. But I will say that depending on how the deal would be structured with Greenland, it could be positive, right? So I think the current estimate was like $1.7 trillion to buy the island. I mean, first of all, it's a huge landmass. It has strategic importance. It's got tons of natural resources.
That's
That's not
reasonable.
gonna, but that's not coming out tomorrow, right? The bill will be due
Sure,
tomorrow, and we'll be
sure.
paying interest on another $2 trillion of debt, right? Whereas we were told Doge is going to cut 2 trillion from the budget, and now we have 2 trillion we've just added to it. I am concerned because he is a huge spender, so I'm concerned there. But I will say, compared to starting fucking World War III and
Right,
like typically the way America, like to your point, like expands its empire is by blowing the shit up out of other countries, typically third world countries, and putting their bases all around the world.
right.
Uh, that is not productive. That is a
No.
destruction of resources. That is not
Yes.
increasing our productive capacity or wealth in any fashion. It's a drain on all that. So it's a mixed bag for me. Like Greenland is an interesting one. I want to see how that plays out. Give me something else, man. Like in this the culture war stuff, like we're talking about. It feels like that pendulum really did. So like I said, the election was a referendum on that stuff, and people are
Sure.
like, we're tired of the woke shit. Fuck off. We're going to do something different. So, what do you see coming down the pipeline for the issues you care about?
Well, I mean, one of the things that I really do care about is, I mean, I live in Texas, so oil and gas is a big, big issue here. And I mean, I'm excited because I think, like, I'm like, okay, why does he want to make it the Gulf of America, which I love that, by the way. I think the Gulf of Texas would be better, but the Gulf of America, it sounds fantastic instead of the Gulf of Mexico. But I think, you know, that might be because he wants to skirt by some of the regulations that
I
go
heard
with
that. Is
the
that
Gulf of
real?
Mexico. I
Is that
don't know, but I hope it's real, because I think that, you know what, there was that BP explosion, that pipeline thing that, I mean, how long was that thing just blowing out? And we're all still alive. Okay, so I'm kind of sick of this whole, well, we shouldn't do this or we shouldn't do that. I live in Galveston Bay. The water is just down the street. You can see it from my front yard. I can hear the buoys in the middle of the ships in the middle of the night blowing their foghorns whenever they're trying to get through. And so, you know, it's we don't it's not like teeming with pollution out here like people think, or like they like that they have in their mind. And climate change is not causing some sort of existential crisis in the Gulf of Mexico. So all of the restrictions that we have on oil and gas just need to come off. I need that energy and I need it right now. So if that's what he's doing, then I'm here for it. I'm super excited about it. I'm also very excited about, and this, I mean, doesn't necessarily have anything to do with this, but I'm excited about some of the legislators who are putting forth legislation for the safeguarding and protection of women and girls. Nancy
you're talking
Mace
about
won.
like the Title IX stuff and the women's
Yes,
sports, all that stuff? Yeah.
two, two, two bills she got passed in as many days. So I'm super excited about that. I met Nancy Mace when I went to Washington, D.C. last time, and she was extremely lovely. And so I'm really excited. And her, the staffers in her office are very attentive. They are really working hard on all of this. So I'm really excited about that. I hope that a definition for male and female, man and woman, is added to the Title IX laws, so that there's never, so we don't have to deal with this anymore. Let's just take it out of the equation, because I feel like we have so many laws to ban things, but we don't have enough laws that are going to actually do something to make it, to render it a useless issue, or a non-problem, right? And I believe that adding the definition of male and female to Title IX will do that, and that will, completely change. It will completely change how, Title IX is used moving forward.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Sorry, I completely agree with this. This is one of those things that I feel like if you did it and you just nipped it in the bud, we
Hmm.
wouldn't have to argue about this anymore, because it's such a contentious issue. And as a dad of three girls, like, I look at this stuff and I wonder what the hell happened, because it
Right.
almost feels like, man, I remember, like in the 80s, like the radical feminists were the ones that people on the right were pushing back. It's like, oh, you're crazy, you're out of control, you're asking for too much. And then now we come full circle to where those radicals are now the bad people, right? They're the ones that are like the TERFs, right? The trans
Yes.
exclusionary radical female. Like, you're a nasty name, and you're bad people. And ultimately, I'm looking at this, and it's like, it's very weird, because we supported women for so long. I remember all through the 80s and 90s, it was all about, women can do this, and yeah, that's an awesome message. Like, yeah, of course, women can do
Sure.
anything. That's great. But then you get to this time now where it's like, well, you know who the best women are? They're actually
The ones
men.
that
Like,
aren't, the ones that aren't women.
yeah, yeah. It's been such a bizarre thing to watch, and I wonder too, because I have the same inclinations. I'm like, am I just too old? Like, am I just becoming that get off my lawn guy that's like
Well,
completely out of touch? But it just doesn't compute for me.
yeah. I mean, and let me tell you something. Going to that hearing on December 4th, and watching the women's liberation front standing side by side with Alliance Defending Freedom. That is essentially a pro-life and a pro-choice public interest firms standing side by side to agree that transgenderism is not okay, and transitioning children in particular is should be against the law in the entire country. I mean, that was life changing for me, to see that these people who just not that long ago, a year or so ago, were standing in the same spot on opposite sides of one another, right? So this is, I mean, the TERFs, right? The trans exclusionary radical feminists. Those are the people who, had to kind of swallow their pride and go to the men in in the conservative circles and say, "Hey, Ted Cruz, can you help us?" And they were shocked when those conservative men said, "Yes, we will." And we will stand with you, because we have daughters, we have mothers, we have sisters. We don't want our daughters, mothers, sisters to be in the bathroom with some perverted man because he feels like he might be, a chick. So seeing that happen has really, and I mean, I remember thinking, like a lot of conservatives did, where the hell are the feminists at? Where are the feminists at? And I went and looked for the feminists, because I didn't know any, and I had never really had any interactions with any. And when I went to look for them on Twitter, and I found them, and they showed me how to protest. They told they gave me all of their wisdom, because really radical feminists are the best at protesting, and they've been doing it for decades. When the conservatives went out to protest, the first thing we did was get arrested, because because it's an art form, actually, and a lot of people don't really know that.
Yep.
um, so we I went to them and asked them what they're doing about this and where they're at in this fight. And lo and behold, they were ready to accept conservatives, conservative women, even women like me, a black conservative who is, very believes in very traditional values. Um, they were ready to accept me and teach me everything that they knew, and that they know, and so that I could, go and teach other conservatives how to do this. It has been a really interesting and eye-opening experience being around a lot of radical feminists. And now I do kind of understand now why they are the way that they are. They're insufferable as shit, and and they're annoying. But I do understand how they got that way. I mean, we're seeing Nancy Mace tweeting out 300 tweets a day and stuff like that. She's got 4 people working on her Twitter, and they're doing it nonstop. And and a lot of people are like, she's being obnoxious. But you know what? That's exactly what the radical feminists were accused of for so many years when they were trying to warn us about all of this stuff. There were radical feminists who were warning about drag queens 30 years ago. There were radical feminists who were lesbians who were warning about testosterone 30 years ago, and it was falling on deaf ears. And now it's come to a head. But, Nancy Mace is one of those people who she had finally had enough, after being a domestic violence survivor and rape survivor. And now she's got some troon that wants to get into her bathroom, and that was it. And it activated her, just like it has activated a lot of other women. And this is the result. Of a woman who is just not gonna take no shit no more. And I'm here for it. I love it.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I wonder though, as you're speaking, like the origin of the problem. I've thought about this a lot, and I wonder if sometimes, and maybe it's the libertarian in me leaking out, but I wonder if the problem is really caused by government, right? Because what people are talking about is like the tragedy of the commons. It's like the bathroom thing, the bathroom debate. What bathroom can people go into? And in a free market, it's like, well, the person who owns a fucking bathroom gets to say who gets to use the bathroom, right? But when we have these, government schools that your children are forced to attend, they are the ones by legislation, by legislative fiat, get to decree who gets to use which bathroom. And I think other cultures have got, transgenderism. It's been broadly, not broadly, but it's been in a lot of different cultures around the world. And I feel like it was always a societal thing where the society, like for example, if I say now I want to be a woman, it's up to the women of the tribe to agree, like okay, cool, you're one of us, and accept them in, or have a separate category. There's a lot of cultures that like, okay, we've got male, we got female, and we have trans males, trans females, whatever it's going to be, and we all accept that going through a hard time. They're confused about that, and they want to present as, and most people are like, okay, cool, leave them alone. They get a separate category, or we decide as a whole to like, yeah, we're going to accept you as one of our own. I feel like that function, that social function, has been sort of, now it's mediated by force through the government, and I wonder if that's driving a lot of the problems we have here. That's my hypothesis, anyway.
Well, I mean, if you talk to the radfems, they activate. I mean, they look at some of these things that have been happening over the years all over the world, and they'll be the first to tell you that transgenderism stuff has not worked out in any culture ever. And it has always created more societal decline, and has caused way more harm to the women and girls in that environment. You take India for example. The young girls are being trafficked by the trans identifying males there, who have some sort of, like, I don't know, like I don't know, like a mysticism or something like that, attached to them. So people just do what they say. The eunuchs in these environments who dress up as women, they're really kind of more like a mob. You know what I mean? And not they are not a good, a net positive in that environment. And no, it is not. It's not dealt with by the government. It's just something that happens. That has occurred throughout the society, right? But one of the reasons why people had started going there to get those surgeries is because they were doing it there and in the Philippines and things like that. But when you look at those societies, the women and the girls are the ones who are the collateral damage for that, right? And so, um, you know, I feel like it doesn't matter where it comes from, whether it's the government or where it's just a naturally occurring societal development through their culture or whatever. Either way, it's not rooted in reality, and so and for that, it should not exist. Just for that reason, it's not good when people glamorize dysfunction, and when they glorify delusions.
Yeah, and I
Because
get your point. I get your point, and I completely understand the argument that something could be either a social good on net or a social negative on net. I'm not disputing any of that stuff. I guess for what I'm always looking at this, the lens I'm looking at it through is like, when is something a social, or either in an individual one-on-one relationship or in a societal relationship, something that I'm willing to murder somebody over. Right. That's
right,
always my line, because people don't, because nobody thinks about this. Like, every law is really an opinion backed up by a threat of force, right? Someone's gonna,
right,
and so it's very easy to say I want something illegal, and then somebody else, some cop, is going to go enforce this. But ultimately, it's a threat of real violence behind it. And
sure,
so I always like to think through the lens of like, what would I personally shoot somebody over, right?
right,
Is this the issue for me? And it's like the easier one is like kids, for sure. Like, that's a different story. But consenting adults, like, hey, I'm 35, I've decided I want to have this surgery to change my body, I want to dress like a woman. Like, I'm not shooting somebody over that. Like, I'm kind of like, I could have my opinions about, like, is this degrading society or is this improving society? We can have those opinions and debates.
for
I'm,
sure.
I'm I'm not using force against that person. I'm kind of like, yo, like, this is your body. Live your life how you want.
Right. I mean, I think that it depends on the person that that the 35-year-old person is. The 35-year-old person your kid? I mean, you know what I'm saying? Like, because parents come to me with children of all, I mean, young adults usually, but most of them are under 30. But I get detransitioners who, my oldest detransitioner was in his 50s, who came to me and said, you know, um, I went to a therapist and they just lied to me. And 10 years later, him and his wife are barely hanging on, and he's got boobs, and you know what I mean, and he's on all of these hormones that are ruining his body. I mean, it just, where do you draw the line? I don't know. But I do know that doctors and therapists and medical professionals that we are supposed to trust should not be allowed to encourage dysfunction. We don't allow
I
them to encourage other dysfunction.
Boy, I cannot agree more. This whole thing of first do no harm seems to be out the window
Yes,
here. Like, I don't know what happened to the medical community, but it doesn't matter whether it's the shots, whether it's this
that's right.
gender affirming Like, we have gotten to the stage where we've thrown caution to the wind, and it's just like,
Mhm.
whatever, give them everything, right? and,
Yeah.
and and push them towards a decision. I've seen some of that stuff. There was that, I'm in Nashville, and there was that leaked Vanderbilt
Yes.
presentation. You see that, where they're talking
Yes.
about how much money they can get by putting somebody into that
Yes.
funnel, and I'm just like, this is gross. This
That
whole
should, I
thing.
mean, that should be considered criminal, right? Because I mean, and I've been talking with some of the lawyers about what is going to happen when we get more discovery from some of these cases. Because when I was at a hearing in Austin, one of the committee hearings meetings, and there was a doctor who was talking about all of the things that she was doing in her clinical practice. Well, she was doing these things in her clinical practice that I would say borders on medical trafficking. That I think that this would, I mean, taking some of the discarded body parts and doing experiments on them. We have a precedent set for that. That's the Henrietta Lacks case. And so at some point, I really do believe that some of these doctors may end up suffering some criminal consequences after some of the discovery gets out about what it is that they're actually doing with the body parts that they discard.
Yeah, and aren't some detransitioners suing doctors as well? Because I think
That's what
that's
I'm
one of
talking about. The
oh,
the
okay.
lawsuits from the detransitioner lawsuits. So I talk to those lawyers all the time because I find lawyers for detransitioners, and I know quite a lot of them. And so, yes, Chloe Cole, Persia Mosley, a lot of the other detransitioners that have active lawsuits, when the discovery happens for those cases, we're gonna get to see how the sausage is made, so to speak,
Mm,
and that is going to have real implications on in of a criminal nature, I believe, because I
when's
do believe that there's more than just ethics violations here. I think that we will start to see some things. I mean, when we talk about medical trafficking, we think about things like kidneys and you know what I mean, stealing people's kidneys and whatnot, and selling organs on the black market. But I think that the Vanderbilt thing creates debt slaves for for these people through by means of mutilating their bodies, right? So it turns them into lifelong medical patients. An argument can be made in the law that that should rise to the level of medical trafficking.
wow? When's that all due? When's that discovery coming back?
I don't know. I mean, every case is different, and they're all in different states. I think my state, my AG was looking into the possibility of even suing based on a civil rights violation of taking away life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, but through sterilization, forced sterilization for children who are minors. But you usually have to have a plaintiff for those kinds of lawsuits. So until and unless we get one, which a lot of people we know don't file lawsuits because they signed a consent form and they believe that that consent form is ironclad, which is not true. That consent form, it does not. You can wipe your ass with that. It does not mean a goddamn thing. You don't give you don't give your consent for your doctors to lie to you, and for your doctors to ruin your health. Giving your consent for a procedure does not exonerate them for the repercussions of the bad judgment that they use and the lies that they tell to convince you to get those procedures. So they don't mean anything in court. A lot of detransitioners don't know that, and a lot of the time, their cases are the statute of limitations runs on them before they get the courage to even decide to do that. A lot of them are still indoctrinated too for a very long time, even though they regret their decision. They don't really realize the extent of their damage until I think the approximate time is 7 years. So
Wow.
they're going to change some laws about that too. That there is no, there, because the only reason why you have a statute of limitations on a lot of things is because the evidence goes away. But in this situation, the evidence doesn't go away. So they're thinking about changing the laws on these on the detransitioner stuff too.
Wow, let's hope this resolves in a positive direction. It's kind of a dark chapter in our history. I don't think it's over yet, but it feels like the tide's turning, and you're doing great work. And I really hope that some people get justice and we get some changes here to stop some of the more egregious aspects of this. So, just wanted to wrap it up again. We're getting close to time, but to thank you so much for everything that you've done. And I want to hold you up as a shining example of people what you can do when you just say what the hell you think and to put your foot down when you feel like a line's being violated and just mean it. And it's just that's there's so few that I'm just like, yes, more of this. So kudos to everything you've done, and please tell everyone where they can find you, all the work that you're working on, and all your locations online, because I want to drive people your way.
Thank you so much. Well, if I mean, you can always find me on X at Gabs Clark 5. I'm on most all the social medias at Gabs Clark 5. And if you need my help, you can go to my website, affirmingreality.com. If you want to help, you can reach out to me on Twitter anytime and offer me your services for all kinds of administrative things because we need people to help. We need volunteers, as many as possible. And if you would rather throw some money at the situation, which I advise everyone to do because this is very expensive and we do not have the backing of any kind of sorry, we don't have the backing of any kind of foundations or anything like that, you can go to GiveSendGo/affirming reality.
Awesome. Hey, thank you so much for your time. This has been quite a roller coaster ride of emotion for me, honestly. But man, I've learned a ton, and just kudos for everything you're doing again. Thank you so much for stopping by.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, bye.